house and orchard with reservoir belonging to it, owned by Agabak, the son of Murtaz, is herewith made over to Uzakbai, the son of Babajan, in exchange for Kumish silver weighing, wasn't you tell me, Uzakbai, said the Qazi, lifting up his voice in the pride of the triumph of the trumpet-like pitch. Tell me, how much does your ass weigh? 157 pounds, 10 ounces, he said, transaction hereby being recorded by me, Qazi Abdul Rahman, the son of Rasul. Chapter 35. From that day onward, Agabak was no longer the Agabak of old. Taking dilatory time by the forelock, he was already transported in his dreams to the palace in Cairo. He was to himself the Egyptian Vizier Agabak ibn Murtaz of Khorazm. He already felt upon his shoulders the weight of the gold-embroidered robe of the state, Japani Hukumati. He already heard with his mental anticipatory ear the clink of medals upon his breast and of the gilt saber at his side. Henceforth, every day spent in Chorak was to him a day robbed from his future grandeur. Every flying minute carried away with it irretrievably the plentiful seeds of boons, blessings, and benefits to come. He was puffed up with arrogant conceit. Conversation with him became a veritable torture to Khoja Nasreddin. He made his only servant, the blind and deaf old man, bow down to the ground before him every morning. He did not admit Khoja Nasreddin to the presence of the ass at all. Meanwhile, life in the village went in customary round. The fruits in the orchards filled with sweet, rich juice. The silkworm wrapped themselves up in their cocoons the first time and the second. The sheep in the pastures yeaned. Every villager had new summer cares on his shoulder. Few guests now gathered of an evening in Safar's Chaikhana. No more than 5 or 6 men. The rest, wearied after the day's toil, went to bed while the sun was still up. The people of Chorak had already grown accustomed to the new keeper of the lake and his strange ways. Ali now keeper chowkidar amda. Different. He was only mentioned casually now in conversation at the Chaikhana. But the sinister shadow of Agabak still hung relentlessly over the villagers who faced another irrigation. More days of wearisome waiting and fear. And suddenly, like the claps of thunder from a clear sky, the tidings came pouring down, each more stunning than the other. The first news was proclaimed by the mullah after the morning service on Friday. Agabak had turned his thoughts to God. And donated 1,500 tangas to the mosque and ordered prayers to be held for the dead throughout the coming year. Fatiha Arroz Fatiha. 1,500 on the eve of the irrigation. How much would he take for the irrigation then? Services for the dead. What dead? Of the glassy worms, of course, the villagers knew nothing and were lost in conjectures. Happily, these prayers are for those whom he has decided to kill off by starvation. The advance Safar grimly prophesied. The second news came from Agabek himself. Within a few days, he was quitting Chorak to make his Hajj, his pilgrimage to the holy stone of Kaaba. In this wise, Agabek saw fit to disguise his coming journey to Egypt. New alarms, new perplexities. Would he leave before the irrigation or after it? And the main thing, most important of all, what price would he fix for the irrigation? The third item of the news was sinister and dreadful. Khatarnak. Agabek had sent riders out in 3 directions. The say direction rahi kada ki borin Qazi Abdurrahman paida kin ki wo khat kitaba di qanuni tamam se anjam mida. He was summoning the Qazi to Chorak. What for? Against whom was he instituting a lawsuit before his departure? The khilaf ki case kadani hazrat pesh. What transactions did he desire to legalize? In this connection, a great gathering was held in the Chaikhana. Meeting qawmi hai bhai. Orchards, fields and pastures were forgotten. And again, Safar prophesied, you wait, he will ruin us all before he goes. Tabaa kada mora hi bebakht mora. Muhammad Ali alone perceived joy amid these alarms. Khali Muhammad Ali kya na khushal. No. Whatever happened, he would no longer demand Zulfiya into his house. It was decided to meet fate halfway and ask Agabek how much he thought of charging for the irrigation. 4 old men were dispatched to him. Delegation jormusha ki bora zu the advance person ko ki bhai tu chand mere serzmo trip kade. The old man did not succeed in seeing him. Mulaqat nashut. He did not condescend. The new keeper of the lake spoke with them on behalf of his master. His words were strange and inspired no trust. He ulta tu keeper magborto sahib tu cheez gufta rahi hai la ulta ke baaz dari tu mor qimat bogi chan qimat dao. You shall receive water. Aw maya darshim, he said, sell nothing in advance. The money that you have in your purses will suffice. And what had they in their purses? 150 tangas. Total ki jam gadan 150 tangas. At most, in all Chorak. The old man told the keeper as much. He laughed, saying, I know your purses. They resemble the dry milked udder of a meager goat. Mogamu chiza buziki chize shij khush nashda, but why shumo munzu alashda. I repeat, nevertheless I repeat, sell nothing. Go, my worthies, and pass my words on to the rest. Tamam ra khabar kin? Ma khabar durum but why shumo misli Shiri Pushudei Buza. Such a reply increased their anxiety rather than diminished it. Just then, the riders came back with the news that Qazi Abdurrahman, after finishing his affairs in the nearby village of Olti Agach, would arrive in Chorak the next morning. Chorak lay hushed in dead expectancy of great doings and unheard of events. Only two of Chorak's inhabitants did not share the common anxiety. Saeed and Zulfiya. As to why they did not, anyone can easily guess. This is well described by Hamadani, called Badi'uz Zaman, Wonder of the Age, in his work The Scent of Morning Roses. Atre Guli Subgahe. This is what he writes. Love, if it be strong, is always attended by a slight disorder of the mind, a kind of madness, to which, however, no importance should be attached, as it is not dangerous and causes no harm. Indeed, how could it be otherwise? When love itself is a divine feeling given to us by Allah, can anything come from Allah that is harmful? Therefore, when meeting an enamored youth, one should not be surprised at his distracted state, no more than at the strangeness of his remarks. For there is taking place within him an upheaval of thoughts and feelings, resulting in a confusion that baffles all, himself no less. Maga muhabbat yakka mamtar chizi sururi junun dara manesh. دیونه طبیعت من آدم را پس مگه جوانا را قارشم نه گای که استوانا گای مولت گوینا گای که استمی تر تغییرات تبدیلات درو خودشون مفاهمه که ما چقدر از من فیلینگز و خیالات درو تیر شده ریم و را کام همی تر سرپرایز نشنه دیگه. He should be heard out with the greatest indulgence and not disputed with. Especially in matters that concern the perfections of his lady love. For all this is useless so long as he is in love, and none but fools can blame him for it. Accordingly, let us follow this advice of the sage and treat our two lovers with all indulgences, leaving them together side by side in the nocturnal garden without attempting to reproduce their conversation, which would but resemble that tangle of emotions and thoughts that baffles all. The old Qazi Abdurrahman had lived crooked and judged crooked for so many years. ये काजी कैसा है हमेशा मतलब डंडी मारी किधर जिंदगी भर रुस्त फैसला ना किधर crooked in a catch for so many years that he had grown crooked himself in the end. In heart, the dil khukaj, body and countenance and shape, even his neck was crooked with a crop-like bulge in the middle, and his nose was crooked and had a sharp cleft tip, and his mouth had an odd twist, and his skimpy little beard was awry. In addition, he limped noticeably on his left foot and walked a bobbing motion, and so he was called in common parlance the crooked Qazi Abdurrahman. To this he would add that he constantly screwed up one or another eye, depending upon the course of his judicial affairs, the right one in expectation of a bribe, the left one upon its taking. And as he invariably abided in one of those two conditions, on this or that side of bribery, he looked not upon the world save with one eye. He arrived in Chorak in a rickety old covered wagon with awry wobbling wheels, which obviously took umbrage at the road's straight nuts and tried hard at every turn to wriggle out of them. The skewbald nag in the shafts was a raw-boned, moat-eaten, low-built little creature with a skimpy tail and a wall-eye. The driver too sat crooked, with one leg bent under him and the other stretched out along the shaft. The Qazi himself, as befitted his rank, sat within the wagon behind drawn curtains, while without, somewhere between the wagon and the horse's croup, perched the scribe, the ancient participant in all the Qazi's shady affairs. This scribe, although not crooked in person, had a wrung and a rumpled appearance, as though someone had washed and ruined him and forgotten to smooth him out after wringing. Leaving him to dry up in twisted lump, the colored turban on his long melon-like head, wrung and twisted too. Agabak had sent his servant out to meet the Qazi and invite him to his guest, but the Qazi refused, desiring to preserve the witnesses of his impartiality against the smirch of mendacious obloquy. He put up at the Chaykhana. Bain before my dakhil guft no mal duruni bain mogi ek tarafa mehman azi ma the Chaykhana morum jay umumi. Safar promptly expelled therefrom all the curious and entrusting the Qazi to the care of Said. Said mogi nigah ko sahib khidmat ko digar mogi burshin shumo. He went forth among the houses to collect blankets. As was the custom of the time, the couch of an honored guest had to be made up of numerous quilts. Ali nalincha balished boy razu khana jam ko bai ki bare Qazi sahib jai jor karne na. And according to Safar's understanding, the Qazi was entitled to no less than a dozen. Yego darjan nalincha balished ko bayad basha barezu kambal mambal. After having performed the ablution and drank his tea, the Qazi, without a word, glanced at his scribe with one eye. The right one. The scribe, without a word, rose and departed in the direction of Agabak's house. He returned at nightfall, Shaushut Pasamat, when a pile of colored quilts, Rang Barangi Kambala, 14 in number instead of a dozen, had risen in the middle of the Chaykhana. And the Qazi reclined upon them, covering himself with the 15th. Mr. Panjumne Pozdamne Kutbail Berema. The scribe, without a word, still without a word, showed him 2 fingers and another half a finger. This meant 250. The Qazi sighed, shut his right eye and opened his left, thereby indicating his passage from the state of 4 to that of after. Thereupon a brief conversation took place between them, carried on in whisper in order that the Chaykhana keeper should not hear them. Thereupon, "What is the suit about?" asked the Qazi. "It is not a suit but a transaction," answered the scribe. "A transaction? Mogai agabek chikhsa moga janab ek maamila ke diniya. Ye moga ego shayad ego miras navishte ke diniya. Moga na ek maamila hai. Transaction." The Qazi said, "Transaction?" wondering, such liberality for a mere transaction. But ek maamila mare qadar Allah tod deji. "I believed he has made a good bargain," whispered the scribe. "It seems to me that he has seized a great gain by the tail." And a lawful gain at that. The Qazi remarked gravely. Absolutely lawful. Tomorrow we shall hear it of it. Bait Qanunim Basha, Shar'i Basha, he finished. And turning over on his side, shut his left eye, since the state of 4 and after did not apply on his hours of sleep. Before and after. Of all the crooked contacts with old Qazi Abdurrahman had ever penned and sealed in his life, this one surpassed all that was thinkable in crookedness. Yani har मामले शॉर्टकट की नाज़दा ये इस्तेमाल ज़्यादा कैसा है मित्र खूब फड़मार मामला मालूम मशा a lucrative lake ये खूब से बंद ज़बरदस्त a house an orchard खाना व बाग were being exchanged the badali for a paltry and wretched ass. ये तमाम रमीदी एक दिन खर मिगरी तू. Here was an obvious case of secret motive. कि रमज़ ज़ी चीज़ है चिक्स है कि तू ये कारी मामला रवानी तमाम शज़ार मिदी द फाम यादम नमायद रो. And according to the law, all shady deals with hidden motives were strictly forbidden. غير قانونية. Yet this contact of barter had to be registered in the book. The Kitab Qanun by the Mamla Shuna. And registered in such a way that the shrewd and experienced lords whom the Khan had placed over the Qazis for the purpose of surveillance should not suspect aught. उत्तर बिंद ज़माने दफ्तरा की उन्हें किधर ऑब्जर्व मुकना नंग करना कि ना चीज़ कर के देंगे डंडी मारी किधर ज़माने कानूनी किताब और दा. When Agabek, in a loud, clear voice, announced his unalterable decision, to the barter his lake, house, and orchard for an ass. A low hum of sensation, like the sound of a disturbed gigantic beehive, arose among the crowd of villagers who gathered outside the Chaikhana. Beginning at the dais of the Chaikhana, this hum rolled over quickly to those in the rear, stirred and excited them, then like a flying wind, swept the fences which were bestrewn with small boys and girls and flew across to the neighboring roofs which were gay with the kerchiefs of the woman. A lake for an ass? तमामी बाजार खातूनों मर्द को किस्सा है कि बंद दखर तब्दील किया बदल किया. A lake for an ass? He was bartering his leg for an ass? There was not a man or woman in Chorak, but whose reason was utterly confounded. Tamam gangster. Kirchi mamla hai. As though enveloped in smoke and whose hearts shuddered. But the old crooked Qazi Abdurrahman, who had grown grey in sharp practices, was not in the least astonished and did not turn a hair. He sat upon the dais of the Chaikhana, looking down with solemn gravity upon the crowd from this throne-like eminence of the 15 sleeping blankets which Safar had collected for him. Below sat the scribe, his long, dismal nose pointed at the open book of magisterial records. He too, following the example of his master, preserved an air of utter imperturbability. The Qazi contemplated the crowd with a stern air. The buzzing murmur began to subside, was pressed down to the ground, and finally died away. Khamosh! All stood silent, in tremulous expectation. Ozakbai, the son of Babajan, announced the Qazi. Khoja Nasreddin advanced towards the dais, leading by his ass by the bridle. What say you in answer to the words of Agabak, O the son of Mortaz? Asked the Qazi. Do you agree to the exchange? I do. A murmur ran through the crowd again. No. He agrees. Who would not? To receive such wealth in exchange for an ass worth 30 tangas at the best of bazaars? Something was afoot here. Some strange, dark mischief. Someone in the crowd, unable to contain himself, bardasht natanist as many khalq, gave a groan or rather a squeak. As the Qazi preserved his former equanimity. Both parties have given their consent. Yahan wahan razi to kya kare Qazi? To the forthcoming exchange, he announced, the first requirement of the law has been fulfilled. Awal qanuni qadam bardashta shud. Aur du taraf razi hai. Now, let every inhabitant of the village who has sufficiently weighty reasons and supporting evidence to show why this exchange should not take place. You're going to for itiraz dara? Dazi mamla? Duimna step, bain pesh. Let him come forth and declare it before the face of all. There was none such. Because it's khabar nahi qissa chahiye dekha wo cheez mamla gaya bhai ki maa khabar do ramazi qissa. The Qazi paused for a minute, then announced, I hereby testify that there are no obstacles to the conclusion of the transaction. Etraz ham hech nist. It remained now to make the entry in the book. Same step, the kitab navishta karo. It had to be an entry free from the slightest hint of crookedness. The old Qazi here revealed himself in the full splendor of his brilliant magisterial wit. He sat deep in thought for 5 minutes. What course those thoughts took in his old head, by what ways they ran, it is difficult to say. But following that course, his turban travelled leftwards and hung tilted over one ear. Then his spectacles travelled leftwards, and finally he himself travelled leftward upon his blanket, which only kept in place and did not tumble down, thanks to the heroic efforts of Safar, who buttressed the edifice with his shoulders. When next the Qazi spoke, his voice had that ring of proud elation which comes from the knowledge of a towering mind. Write down the names of the parties of the transaction. He commenced the scribe. نوشته کو طرفارا مدعی و گواو تمام را نوشته کو تفصیلات چی. The latter scratched away with his pen, himself so deeply buried in the book that it seemed as if he were scratching it with his long nose. The Qazi meanwhile searched his mind for words that would best sustain the lawful character of the contract in terms of approximately equivalent consideration. مناسب ये सी गल्ली दे रहा हूँ हम अल्फाज वजह से शुरू करूँ. नविश्ता काले a lucrative lake, एक बंद ज़बरदस्त, with a house an orchard belonging to it. He said in a significant prophetic kind of voice, holding up one finger, very good. Let us put that down. A lucrative lake with a house, an orchard belonging to it. He made an imperious sign to the scribe. We shall put it down in the following order. A house and an orchard with a reservoir belonging to it. For who can say that a lake is not a reservoir? On the other hand, if the said house and orchard belong to the lake, in other words, the reservoir, then it is clear that in reverse order, the reservoir belongs to the house and the orchard, right as I have spoken. The house and orchard with the reservoir belonging to it. This was a brilliant move, which at a single stroke solved half a problem. By a simple transposition of words, the lake was, as if by magic, transformed into a paltry reservoir, situated in some orchard or other in front of some house. The chief item of value in such an arrangement was, of course, the house. This reservoir, a house belongs to the house. As it is house should. The chief item of the value in such an arrangement was, of course, the house. Then the orchard, while the reservoir was merely mentioned in passing as a trifling thing of little worth. The property of one of the parties was thus reduced to 100th part of its value. The transaction, however, still had a noticeably leftward list. In order to set it straight up upon its keel, that wishes of Qazi proceeded to examine the property of the other party. Here again, the lens of his wit struck a new telling blow. Ozakbai, son of Babajan, tell me, by what name do you call the ass which you are bartering? I have always called him simply Jackass. Jackass? Exclaimed the Qazi. What a disreputable, ugly name for so precious an animal, in exchange for which you are to receive a whole fortune. Would it not be wiser to give him some other more noble sounding name? If not Altin gold, then at least Kumish silver. I do not mind, acquiesced Khoja Nasreddin, catching the ball of the Qazi's thought in mid-air, as if it were. It matters not to me, still less to him. Right, the Qazi said to the scribe, the aforementioned property, house and orchard with reservoir belonging to it, owned by Agabak, the son of Murtaz, is herewith made over to Ozakbai, the son of Babajan, in exchange for Kumish silver, weighing, wasn't you tell me, Ozakbai, said the Qazi, lifting up his voice in the pride of the triumph of the trumpet-like pitch, tell me, how much does your ass weigh? Wasn't it, Chanda? About 150 pounds or so. I must have the exact weight. Point, dash, dash, dash. Very well, 157 pounds, 10 ounces. The overweight being due to the idleness and devoured bread cakes. او کم اضافه شده بازن چند روز از بس که زیاد کلچه ملچه زیاد خورده. Right, trumpeted the Qazi to the scribe. In exchange for silver weighing 157 pounds, 10 ounces, he said, transaction hereby being recorded by me, Qazi Abdul Rahman, the son of Rasul, in complete accord with the existing laws and the royal commands, according to the Murawaja Qawaneen. Khoja Nasreddin looked at the Qazi with awe. His was the work, albeit in fraudulent cunning, of a genuine master, and one could not help admiring it. Faradias the magar ustada. The contract is herewith officially recorded under my seal and signature, trumpeted the Qazi, his voice filling the chaikhana and overspilling into the space before it occupied by the crowd, while he himself, by imperceptible degree, tilted more and more towards the left. Just then, as luck would have it, Safar forgot himself and removed his buttressing shoulder, whereat the Qazi, on the last word, slid slowly to the floor together with all the 15 blankets. Oh. Had taken place. Muamala khatam. The lake now belonged to Khoja Nasreddin, the ass to Agabag. The Qazi issued corresponding documents to both parties. The amazed villagers departed to their homes, discussing the day's events among themselves. The road before the Chaikhana became deserted, and presently the Chaikhana itself became deserted, the old Qazi quitting Chorak for other places where a variety of suits and transactions awaited his wise decisions. Before his departure, Khoja Nasreddin privately inquired of the worthy Qazi how soon he would be able to drop in at Chorak again on his way back. The Qazi's left eye shut immediately, and his right one opened instead, betokening the state of before. In a haladi before, after still. In 4 days or so, as soon as I have finished my affairs in several villages in the vicinity, he answered, and grunting, crawled up the wheel spokes into the wagon. The scribe settled himself in his customary place between the wagon and the horse's croup. The jai driver Muharrir the duruni khodi wagon. The driver drew one leg up at the knee and ratcheted the other forth along the shaft. Driver sist Chalaji clicked his tongue and started at the horse. The wagon trundled down the road, creaking, swaying and wobbling, and disappeared behind the poplars. That night was a sleepless one for both Khoja Nasreddin and Agabag. Seized with impatience to don the court robe of Egypt, Agabag refused to tarry a single day in Chorak. He had decided to depart at dawn. His travel bags had been packed on the eve. Room only being left in them for 2 small ewers containing the magic brew. By midnight, these ewers had been packed away too, their mouths carefully sealed with wax. The incantations which Khoja Nasreddin had written down on a sheet of thick Chinese paper, Agabag hid away in a secret girdle. Kinini mantrar khandini, bazi the tempo, wapas appear mashana, unar navishta very Chinese paper. Agabek hid away in a secret girdle which the traveler wore under his shirt, the bandi gid diga, against his bare skin. That girdle contained also his money and the jewels which he had received from Muhammad Ali. Day began to break. Subfut. It is time, said Agabek. Farewell, Ozak Bhai. Expect from me a rich present from Egypt. I shall send you a hookah worked in gold and silver ewer for wine. Khoja Nasreddin answered with a low bow. I thank you, O powerful and illustrious Vizier of the land of Egypt. Suffer me, O Vizier, to do you a last service. He went into the house and reappeared a minute later, dragging after him the resisting ass. With a clatter of his hoofs on the moist stone steps, the ass descended into the garden and made straight for the flower beds, half of which had already been nibbled away. Khoja Nasreddin held him back by the girdle and threw the travel bags over his back with a dexterous movement. What are you doing? Cried Agabek, snatching the bags away. Burdening the prince? Verily you have taken leave of your senses. Ozak Bhai. But why not? Khoja Nasreddin asked in perplexity. Agabek threw him a scornful look by way of reply, and with a grunt swung his bags upon his own shoulders. Think you to travel thus all the way to Cairo? Khoja Nasreddin asked. I shall buy me a pack horse in Kokan. Just for these bags. I shall walk myself, for it would be unseemingly for me to ride while the prince walks. I would hire a cart for the prince. Only I'm afraid he will be insulted by the jeers of ignorant fellows who are accustomed to seeing such quadrupeds as the prince is in his present image harnessed to cart instead of riding in them. That is wise. Bilkul. How infinity is your wisdom, O Wazir! The blue of early dawn swiftly faded to the lighter hues of morn. A tinge of pink stained, birds began to twitter and warble all over the garden. Subh khair. The ass, Agabek, and Khoja Nasreddin went out into the road. The distant mountains were shrouded in dusk, their bases floating in a dense whitish mist, while their snowy peaks were already shining with a faint, transparent glow. The first smile of awakening day, the mist within the gorges and clefts was already reeking, stirring and rising upwards. How easy it was to breathe. It is best to have Arabian dinars on the journey. The safar muga dinar Arabi khub michla. Khoja Nasreddin admonished Nasihat Kachra Agabek. They are accepted everywhere in their full value, for unlike other coins, there are no cheap alloys in Arabian gold. but be careful in changing them. The money changers are often swindlers and may try to palm off on your fraudulent coins of base alloy. When you have seen to all your affairs in Kokand, O illustrious vizier, visit the shop of the money changer Rahim Bhai. Karat khalash the Kokand, yak dukan asta Rahim Bhai, money changer unj borek chakar. On the eve of your departure, it is not far from the principal cistern of the bazaar, on the left-hand side of the big arik, which is being lined with stone these last 15 years and has not been lined yet. As for Rahim Bhai, any man in Kokand will direct you to him. Everyone knows him for an honest merchant, who can be fully trusted. Happily, he will buy my jewels as well. Oh yes, trust no other man. He will give you a better price too. On the left hand side of the big arik, you say, next to the principal water tank, yes. What a mighty memory Allah has put into your head, O Wazir. MashaAllah. Farewell, Uzak Bhai. Khuda Hafiz. Raftin diga. Farewell, illustrious Wazir. Expect a present from me. Marainum bare tofa. I thank you, O magnificent one. Bid farewell to our royal prince now. You long had the joy of living under his royal shadow. Thank him for the great joy and honor. I bow to the ground and thank you, my lord. With that, they parted. For a long time, Khoja Nasreddin stood looking after them. And so strange is human nature. And so strange is human nature, that although Agabek was his enemy, he could not help feeling a bit sad at seeing him go. For such is the power that separation wields over our hearts. Judai enemy zor dara. Arkas ki basha, idab shor mi dada mara. Departure. As for the ass, it goes without saying, lazimni ki bugim, when after retreating some 50 paces, he stopped. Turned his head and looked at his master with a melancholy, reproachful glance. It was all that Khoja Nasreddin could do to keep his eyes dry. Oh, bread cake eater, he mentally exclaimed, do you really think that your old friend and companion of the road, signal rain in the road, Magavu Andwali road, how Chakara, do you really think that your old friend and companion of the road is capable of giving you away to an Agabek? Capable of parting with you? Nay, I shall not be guilty of such base treachery, and we shall keep company for many more years to come. Most तो अंडवालिज्म लग गया है, तू एक ब्रेक भी कर फिलहाल एक सिचुएशन है, बोर कार परफॉर्मेंस एंजॉय भी दे. The departing ones vanished from sight. Raftan, Khuda Hafiz. A pink, timid sunbeam, cool, clear and fresh, glancing off by the smooth mountain snows, glided down the road upon their tracks. Manzar kashi hai bachesh digar kaski. Click yad dara ona boras pas zikara iminar bigger footways. Khoja Nasreddin returned to his clay hut by the lake. The thief was waiting for him there, as arranged the day before. I am ready, he said briefly. Give me a little money so that I may not have to procure it for myself in Kokand. اگر د کار شد بس مجبورم خودم بندوبست کنم دیگه نه خب بیده من روپی. Khoja Nasreddin counted out some money, saying, watch Agabag. Ushtubal Agabag Basha. Follow his every step. He will not quit Kokand earlier than a week from now. By the yag of the Sargardan Bumna Unju. As Kokand, the yag of the Burnash Nay. That will give me time. If you hurry, watch my hours particularly. I know not how I shall bear the blow should I lose him. Agar gum shud, ma khabar nim ki hal az mein chhat chuna. You shall not lose him, for he is dear to me as well. Maam khosh tarah ho raha hai. I have got so used to him. Adat kadam mere kacchi. It's astonishing what can there be hidden away in that long-eared, obstinate creature with the ever-rumbling belly to so captivate one's heart. Jesus the Mariamzo. Go now. May the Almighty Allah preserve you. Khudayaret. Keep well, and may Allah help you in the fulfillment of your design. And so, on that bright morning, Khoja Nasreddin speeded yet another, the one-eyed thief, upon his distant journey. Ki iram nafar duyum ram da safar reikat ki bor diganal saya sho. Gum na kani nafar yar ya gafta inar sargardan ishtini injira kharma ushtubasha. Ada warze.